Hello and welcome once again to the Gaming News Canada show presented by Bede Gaming. I'm your host, Steve McAllister. For almost 5 years now, this program has introduced us to many wise and accomplished people in the gaming business. Hearing their personal stories working in the industry and getting their perspectives on the evolution of gaming, both retail and online, and sports betting around the world has hopefully been of benefit to the Gaming News Canada audience. On this episode, our guest is someone who over the past 3 decades has worked with some of the biggest brands in the industry, including Ladbrokes and William Hill, and who over the past 3+ years has been steering the ship for Bede Gaming as its Chief Executive Officer. So, we're extremely pleased to welcome to the show Colin Cole-Johnson. Colin, thank you so much for being with us.
Steve, hi, good morning. Thank you for having me. I'm pleased to be here. I'm a keen listener, so it's going to feel odd listening to myself back, but let's go.
And Colin joins us from just outside of London, and we record this podcast on Thursday, October 2nd. And Colin, before we hit the record button, you mentioned that you've been doing a little bit of traveling this week and spending some time in Germany with the owners of Bede.
Yeah, it's that time of the year, isn't it, Steve? I was at NASBL in Niagara a couple of weeks ago, had a good time there. It's sort of budget and planning time of the year, so that takes me to Germany to meet with our owners, the Merker Group. So we've been in Dusseldorf this week, and then next week is for G2E. So yeah, it's a busy time of the year.
Yeah, as you mentioned, Colin, we had Paul Burns from the Canadian Gaming Association on the podcast last week, and we were kind of joking that it's been a planes, trains, and automobiles September for Paul. But you're absolutely right. Between SBC, Summit Lisbon, and of course Global Gaming Expo coming up this week when this podcast will be dropped, it's a crazy time for the industry.
Yeah, always the same this time of year, and then we look forward to January.
Exactly. Hey, Colin, you're 3.5 years into your tenure now at Bede. I just wonder if we could start off this interview by, just talking a little bit about your decision to join Bede back in, I think, 2022, and just, kind of the focus of the company these days, and if there has been kind of an evolution of that strategy since you've joined the company.
Gotcha, yeah, happy to. So joining Bede was quite straightforward, Steve. I mean, I could go through a lot of history here, but I won't. I was invited to join Bede. I was working at Entain at the time as the gaming product director. Great role, and Entain a good operator, and probably the most exciting part of that was supporting the UK operators who I knew well, but also BetMGM and focused out on New Jersey and some of the opening states of the US. That was before they went into Ontario. So I knew Bede from my time at Rank and maybe before then. When I was at William Hill, we looked at acquiring a company that became Bede. So I got to know them then in about 2012. They were operating a live bingo solution as well as sort of a emerging platform and operating division. And then when I was at Rank, we migrated from OpenBet onto Bede for the Grosvenor and Mecca brands. And as part of that agreement, Rank actually took a shareholding in Bede, and I was a representative board member for Rank. So I got to know the owners really well, the team really well. I always had a real affinity with the people at Bede and love the product as well. So I'd always been an operator until I went to Entain, and then I was sort of supporting Entain's operating divisions. So it was a chance to look at a different part of the industry and the business. Bede had obviously done some transformational activity while I was away, being awarded to support OLG being the most significant. In 2020 being acquired by the Merker Group. So quite a lot of transformational activity happened while I've not been involved at Bede. So yeah, it was a really exciting opportunity to come back into. And been 3.5, nearly 4 years now, and still good fun.
I just wonder, Colin, coming from the operator world, is there something that maybe you brought to Bede that was needed? And then on the other hand, are there things that you've learned from working with a company that where maybe the chief focus has been a little different than what you dealt with during your time with companies like Entain and Ladbrokes and William Hill, as I mentioned earlier?
Yeah, so I mean, the focus at Bede had always been to be an operator and to be a technology platform partner. And right, if you go back to the start, Bede had its own operating division. So they were operating multiple brands in the UK market, and our founders, Joe, Dan, and Michael, had all had operating backgrounds as well as either technology or business development experience. Bede went through a bit of a transformation sort of during the latter period that it was with Rank, where they absolved the operating division and sold it. It's now part of MGM and Leo Vegas. And Bede had become a sole sort of platform and technology partner. So I think, we strive to be as close to our operators as possible. I think one of the things that I've added coming back into Bede is that operating experience, because we don't have that sort of direct in-house operating experience. We partner really closely with our operators. It's part of what we do that I think differentiates us. But that's probably a real focus that I've brought back into Bede. There's difference maybe what it was for the preceding years.
I mentioned in the introduction, Colin, just doing this podcast has allowed me to meet some really interesting people, and I tend to ask every guest on the show just about why they got into the gaming business. I mean, it looks back and it ages me a bit too, but 1995 I think is when you joined Ladbrokes, and I just wonder, what were you doing before going to Ladbrokes, and what attracted you to get into to get into this industry? And I think back, 1995, I was like 1 year into to a 3-year tenure with the National Hockey League Players Association as its media relations manager. So my career has gone in a much different path since then as well.
Well, I was still studying, if I'm honest. So you go back all that time, and it was I sort of stumbled into the industry. My brother works in the industry as well. He had an interview lined up at Ladbrokes, which was the local employer in the town that I lived in. And he didn't want to go and work there because he had to work on a Saturday. So I went along instead. And it was a recruitment drive to recruit for telephone betting for the Grand National. That's where it started. But I've always loved sport, and being close to sport is easy when you're in our industry. So I still play football, I coach football, but I take part in other sports as well. And I've always liked games, and I studied statistics and geography. So the statistics side of it, I do as well, I think is really relevant in our space, and being able to understand and interpret numbers really quickly does really help. Obviously, that's probably an old skill, Steve. It's we're being upstaged now by AI and other tools, but still think that's a core skill that you can always fall back on if you're understanding anything in our space to do with product or marketing or the performance of the business.
I was just going to say, I mean, you'll be one of the people in the industry that can really appreciate what mobile and digital has done to the gambling industry, and how much of a pardon the pun, how much of a game changer it's been.
Yeah, I mean, I do consider I was maybe fortunate to be where I was at the time, because I was big on telephone betting technology. That's what I evolved into. And obviously that was quickly usurped in the sort of early noughties, late 90s by the internet. And Ladbrokes started up an e-gaming division. So I was quickly pointing myself in that direction to say, how do I get involved there? That's the exciting bit that's thriving. And telephone betting, as much as I loved it, because you're dealing with customers all the time. And it's a big people operation, so you're surrounded by colleagues the whole time. It's a really fun place to work. It was going to die, right? It was going to really die out when the internet came in, and then latterly when smartphones evolved. It was too easy to use what's in your hand to place a bet or play a game than it is to actually pick up the phone or go to a venue. I still enjoy going to casinos, by the way. It's never a different experience. You go to a casino, something different happens. Whereas you're on your phone, you know what's going to happen in terms of playing the games. But the industry's always appealed to me. It's always been fun. I've enjoyed many different roles, and I've been able to host customers, host events, travel around the world, live in different countries, meet my wife through this as well. So it's been kind to me, Steve.
And just quickly on technology too, Colin, like, it's crazy to think like 1995 was when the internet was first came along. I mean, I remember at the NHLPA we created one of the first websites in North American sports, and then I remember sitting in an airport in Sochi, Russia, a year before the Winter Olympics, and watching an NHL game on my phone, and literally a year earlier, hearing somebody, a high-ranking sports media executive, talk about people would never watch a sporting event on their phone. And you mentioned artificial intelligence a couple of seconds ago, and you think we're with AI, even though it's talked about so much right now, we're not even scratching the surface of where we're going to go with artificial intelligence. So just over
Mm.
the 30 years of your career, it is pretty incredible just how technology has evolved and will continue to evolve.
Yeah, been so many transformations. Yeah, we talked on one there that's probably a long time ago, but there's a long list, isn't there? Like, broadband wasn't a thing. You had to download your casino games before you could play them. You don't have to do that anymore, and you didn't have to with sort of Flash. That evolved into mobile, smartphone, HTML5. I remember trying to play the first live dealer casinos. One of my favorite online products, playing on live casinos and playing game show games. They're a lot of fun now, and they're still evolving because you've got people who are passionate about entertainment working out in industry investing in those products, which is always great. What will happen next, Steve? I don't want to predict it, but trying to embrace AI, at Bede from a technology and a gamification and a platform perspective is one of the things we're getting our head around every day.
Yeah, we'll get into that in a few minutes. I do want to talk. I'll just mention right now, Colin. Bede Gaming, very kindly stepped up as presenting sponsor for both this podcast and the newsletter for the remainder of 2025. So really grateful to you and Andrea Pierce, your communications chief, for your support. But it does lead to the question about Bede's work in Canada, and I'm not expecting you to give away state secrets here, but I know there is a partnership with the Ontario Lottery and Gaming Corporation. And can you just spend a couple of minutes talking about Bede Gaming's work as much as possible with OLG and kind of your strategy around Canada, where again in your 3 years with Bede, there's been significant changes to the legal gambling landscape here in our country.
Yeah, so I mean, we've had a great partnership with LG now for, I think we've been working with them probably for 7 years. And obviously didn't go live 7 years ago. There was a significant period of transformation there before we went live. So we consider that as hugely important to us. OLG from a sort of Bede internal perspective is our really important customer for us, real focus, real priority, and the only partner we work with in the lottery space. So our other partners are in other markets. We always work in regulated markets, always have done. But yeah, OLG stands alone in terms of lottery and casino, and in terms of its significance in the market in which it's operating in. We get obviously good insight around the Ontario market by being OLG's partner. We try and put that into good practice for OLG. Bigger verticals within OLG won't be surprised to people. It's the lottery and it's the iCasino. So that's where we're really focused with them. We're hoping to expand in Canada, Steve, but Ontario is a big market on its own. We are looking across at what's happening in Alberta. We're hopeful that something positive happens there soon. If it doesn't, we'll keep trying to speak to the other Crown corporations in the other provinces. But they have their own partners already, and they all look to be doing very nicely. We'll only tread where it's legal and regulated to do so. And we realise we've got a really important relationship with OLG, and we'd like to build more relationships with others who are operating in regulated Canada. And we're ambitious, but we're quite patient as well.
You mentioned that you and I believe that Bede co-founder and chair Michael Brady joined you in Niagara Falls last month for the North American Association of State and Provincial Lotteries annual conference and trade show. I'm assuming that Bede joining that association is kind of part and parcel with the rapid growth we've seen around regulated gaming in not only Canada but of course the United States.
Yeah, we're still learning, I think, Steve, how to grow our profile with lotteries. We obviously had come from a commercial background, and you mentioned the brands I've worked for before. I've been very sort of European and commercial focused. We're sort of learning where to tread and what's important and how we get to meet people. And Ontario Lottery celebrating its 50th anniversary and hosting the event in Niagara sort of prompted us to look at, what is this that's happening? How do we get involved in this? And Michael and I, we met lots of people that week, including some of our colleagues at OLG. It was a good start for us, Steve. I think there's more we can do. We obviously had a bigger presence at the Canadian Gaming Summit this year because we've attended that previously. It's about trying to form the right connections, right relationships, making sure people understand what Bede can do. And then when people are considering their options, what they do with their technology or their partners, we can be in their minds. And typically these processes run over many years in terms of, working out what you want to do, then exploring that in the market, and with the Crown corporations, that's always a RFI or an RFP type process. So yeah, we're just trying to build our awareness, I think, Steve, and back to, thank you for having us as your sponsor, because that will help no end.
Colin, as someone who's been, based in Europe and in the industry for 3 decades, and with Canada being fairly new to regulated gaming, the industry here has come under some criticism from some places, related to sports betting and gaming advertising and responsible
Yeah.
gaming and problem gambling. I'd just love to get your comments on, and maybe with a focus on Ontario, just the 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 regime that's been set up in Ontario, and how you would compare how Ontario's done it with other gambling entities around the world.
Yeah, I mean, the conditions globally, Steve, for certain, they're probably getting tighter, right? It's harder from a tax perspective, and that's an economic and political function. From a regulation perspective, then I'm probably one of those in the industry who quite like that regulation is getting serious about making it safer for players. You mentioned the proliferation of advertising. I think that's come first. And I think ideally those things would have moved hand in hand. So I think, what the Ontario regulator's doing in terms of the joined up self-exclusion scheme, for example, for digital operators is going to be, that's the right step. And I think we just need to keep making those right steps. When I look at the other markets that we operate in, obviously the UK regulators are very mature regulation compared to other territories. And the framework of regulation in the UK that we conform to, has a lot in there in terms of protecting players. Whether it's the safety of their funds, whether it's their responsibility to the operators to look out for the safety of the player. That's quite a robust framework, and Ontario is very much aligned to that, which is good. We operate in some other jurisdictions. Germany's an interesting one, Steve. I don't know if you've talked about the German market before, but from a tax point of view, there's a tax on stakes effectively, which hasn't driven the innovation yet. Some operators there are doing some interesting things to try and meet that requirement, which adapts games, adapts sports bets and things like that. So that's interesting, because tax and regulation has always driven innovation in our industry. But also in Germany, we have the quite restrictive rules around slots play, for example, and the freedom of movement of your funds. So there's probably a bit too much friction in that sense in Germany. And I think if you do some research around Germany and the size of the black market, it's too large in Germany because of how restrictive it is. That's my personal view. So it's got to be somewhere more towards, I think, what the UK and Ontario are doing, which allows operators to flourish, presents a good playing experience for customers, can keep tax and regulators, and from a lottery point of view, good causes, well funded. There's a better balance to strike, I think, than some jurisdictions have got in place at the moment. But it's ever evolving, and I was thinking about this before I joined, Steve, because I thought it might be a question. My personal view, I'm a father to 2 teenage girls. Too much advertising for gambling. We've jumped back 30 years in this podcast and jumped back another 30 years. I sort of remember when I worked at Ladbrokes in the early days, the only adverts we ever really used to put out were in the horse racing newspaper, the Racing Post, or the Sporting Life, and maybe on a Saturday, the National Press. That was it. There wasn't anything else. And obviously over the time, it's proliferated into other channels. So, I do think it's maybe overbalanced in the world of too many adverts, but that's because of the proliferation of channels and all the technology that we were talking about earlier. So stronger regulation, stronger protection for players, I think it's the right balance at the moment.
Yeah, and you see some guardrails put on those ads around the world, Colin. I believe Australia now that you're not allowed to sports books can't advertise during matches or during games while they're taking place. And in Ontario, as you mentioned earlier, the Alcoholic and Gaming Commission of Ontario about 2 years ago now banned the use of athletes in advertising, and I think that
Yeah.
was a step in the right direction. And I do wonder if, I kind of like the idea of having that ban during games on advertising, but that's a slippery slope because as you know, media companies are making a lot of money off those
Yeah.
sportsbook operators having sponsorship during games and the commentators, giving out betting information and there's a real balancing act from an economic standpoint and
Yeah.
also a safe play standpoint.
Yeah, it's not a one-dimensional issue, Steve. I get more emotive about it when I'm driving my girls to play football, soccer, and it's daytime and there's a casino advert on the radio. Like, come on. So I think we've got to be better than that. But I know it's not one-dimensional.
Yeah, it's funny, the week we're recording this podcast, Colin, I was texting with my 29-year-old son who had sent me a screenshot. He'd won $50 off a $1 bet and was
Sure.
really excited that he'd won $100 that week. I think he spent $5 or $12 on 5 different bets. I thought that's what betting should be for
Yeah.
young people. It should be a fun experience. It's no different than the days when you and I could go watch a movie for £2 or £3 at the theater back in back in the '80s and '90s, and sports betting is just another form of entertainment if done in
Yeah.
that kind of in that way.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, I think we have to look out for our future customers in a better way, maybe in terms of advertising and those players who are at risk from that sort of advertising, that sort of enticement. And back to your question, I think some of the regulators globally are doing it better than others, and the markets that we operate in at Bede, can be pretty satisfied that the regulation and structure there is pretty strong actually.
Ready to accelerate your digital growth? Bede Gaming delivers a market-leading platform with best-in-class products driven by secure, cutting-edge technology. With an open API platform, robust integration suite, and unlimited configurability, you can achieve the ultimate end-to-end customization for your iGaming ambitions. Bede Gaming is your partner for success. Get in touch at bedegaming.com. You mentioned gamification earlier, Colin. Would love to get your thoughts on that. Bede announced back, I think, in September, a new tournament feature. And when
Yeah.
you go to conferences, gamification and personalization are something you seem to hear a lot of, and of course, cynical folks will say that gamification is kind of a first course, kind of the super salad to getting in the main course of spending money to game, and on the glass half full side, it really is just for people to have a bit of fun with product. But can you just talk a
Yeah.
little bit about the creation of this tournament feature, what it is, and how Bede looks at gamification?
Yeah, sure. We, one of the things that we strive for, Steve, we try and be innovative. It's not easy. We've got a lot of good competitors out there, so it can look like we're doing the same. And one of the things we do internally is run hackathons. So all our teams can be involved. It doesn't matter what function they're in. We come together at least once a year, and they can pick any topic or any challenge or any opportunity they like and come up with an idea. So I think tournaments and some of our other developments that have been quite important have all started out as a hackathon idea. Tournaments was one of those, but I'm not claiming that Bede's the first to do tournaments. We have maybe adapted it in a way that's slightly different to how others do it, is maybe the edge that we've brought to it. So that's where it started. If you look around sort of consumer entertainment, particularly digital, and anything to do with a game, whether that's a slot game or a soft game, there's usually some element that sits over the top of that game that is something more than just the game itself. And again, that's what we're trying to do with the tournaments. We give the operator the opportunity to allow customers to score points in many different ways that they choose. We'll keep evolving those because we'll come up with new ideas like losing streaks, winning streaks, finding different symbols on the reels and all that sort of thing. But we're starting out relatively simple. But I think the different edge that we've brought to it initially, and it sort of reflects our position as an open platform, is that we're not going to restrict those tournaments to any particular game provider. So if you want to mix all your Egyptian themed games into one tournament, you can do. It doesn't mean it's just the Egyptian themed games from one provider. So we're just trying to make it interesting in that respect. One of the other things we do, sorry, it's a shameless plug into the platform, Steve, but we try and connect all the features of our platform so that, if you're offering part of our tool set, you can connect it to the other things. So on our tournaments, when you want to pay out, whether that's prizes, whether it's cash, which is typically awarded, you can actually connect our tournaments to our bonus feature. So if you wanted to give away free spins or win spins, or if you want to give away a deposit match offer, or if you want to give away something else that's available in our bonus tool, you can do that via the tournaments as well. So we're always trying to make our tool set work well together. It also will connect out to our segmentation feature. So if you only want to make that tournament available to certain segments, or if you want to restrict certain players from it, that all hangs together really nicely and you can automate it. So one of our key user groups, Steve, is the back office user for our operators. And we try and make their life as easy as possible. And if you're running tournaments at the moment via a game provider, you're probably using their back office to do it. That means if you want to run it for multiple game providers, you've got multiple back offices. Again, we're trying to make that easy by automating it and bringing it all into the Bede back office. So I've covered a number of areas there, but we think it hangs together really nicely. We're excited to see our operators start using it. And then we'll keep evolving it because we'll keep investing in it because we won't have got it right on the money straight off the bat.
Colin, I'm forever fascinated by kind of the behind the scenes stuff that goes on with a product team. And of course, company like Bede will put out a press release on this new tournament feature. We'll talk about it here in the podcast, and it's almost like the duck swimming on the Thames, where the feet are padding furiously underneath the water. And I have so much respect for the engineers and developers and those people on product, because in today's mobile world, it is complex, right? It's about good product. It's about integration. It's about innovation. It's about being able to pay people quickly. There's a player protection element. And I just wonder, how many of those product meetings do you sit in, and how much of a role do you play in those discussions?
Not enough, Steve. It's the thing I'm sort of passionate about. I used to be in a role where I'd be working directly with the game providers, which if you really want to get me a light, that's probably the topic. But we've got, there's different elements to Bede's feature suite, which are really critical to how an operator can operate really efficiently. And also, whether you're looking at it from the back office user, the client services, or the customer service operator point of view, the people who are programming bonuses and promotions. Bede has got a campaign manager tool that helps automate a lot of that. So there's absolute degrees of expertise in operating any platform. I've operated on the microgaming platform in my early days, which obviously now Supergroup Games Global. I've operated on the Playtech platform when I was at William Hill. I've used OpenBet extensively. When I was at Rank, it was more Bede and more OpenBet. When I was at Entain has got its own technology platform. So I've got experience across all. Bede platform's really slick in terms of how it helps customers automate and how the back office users can access what they need to. I'm excited, I think the next phase, Steve, we refer to AI, but a lot of the repeated customer queries you get the same sort of topics in customer queries, and you always have done. It's around promotions, it's around how the game's operating, it's around where are my funds. AI is going to make some of those interactions really slick, and then you can have your operations team focused on adding real value. So, there's a load of interest stuff goes on behind the scenes. I'd say I want to be in those conversations more, Steve. There's some really interesting stuff going on with tournaments in other markets as well that Bede hasn't built yet, but you can see it elsewhere. A lot of what's happening in the UK is focused on appealing to the mass market audience. And some of the things that have been done with tournaments do that really well. So, they might offer every customer, as long as they're registered and they're verified, they can play in a free tournament and win a prize. And they might offer those 2 or 3 times a day, and it's driving huge volumes to their site. So that you can shift your marketing investment in that way. You can put it into your prize pools rather than spending on the media. It's an interesting dynamic, right? You give it back to the player accounts rather than pay the media on, because
Right.
All those social networks are there to get the word out for you amongst customers of a like mind. So,
And then
Multi-dimensional.
Yeah, and then having that community, right, Colin, where
Yeah.
that community was probably speaking within an operator's app and having those conversations and kind of spreading the gospel from within.
That's the right word, and they'll be on their other networks as well. All the different social platforms, telling their mates that, oh, come and join me here. And then you've got some other innovation going on again in slots where the proper multiplayer slots are being developed, Steve. So there's a battle slots product out there that I think is really interesting, where you play your game, but you basically get to attack the players who are playing on the other same version of the game, and you try and score points against each other. It's interesting stuff, all based around a slot concept. So yeah, there's lots of innovative people in the content space, but at Bede we focus on how we connect with those products in the right way. So we have to understand those products and connect with them, and then we have to bring the connectivity of all our different services and tools, which as I've mentioned, are in tournaments, are in segmentation, are in safer gambling, are in the sort of player account management features of the back office, are in our automation suite. It's an interesting space, and often overlooked actually, because everyone looks at the front end product.
Yeah, Colin, listening to your speak, it reminds me, a lot of conversations around AI right now are that it's going to cost people jobs, and when I hear someone like you speak so passionately about product, it does reflect the importance of that human touch, and then AI is not going to have that passion and that drive and have those conversations to make products better.
Yeah, I mean, the way that we're using AI we're using it in technology, Steve, in really practical ways, because it helps us forecast, it helps us model, and that it's looking at how we provision our technology. It's peak. When's the peak? And AI is better at predicting that than humans. When's it going to be not busy? Those sort of things are helpful from a tech perspective. From a product point of view, I found it interesting. You can converse, can't you, with AI? One of the things I do with AI is ask it for ideas around a topic, and it will throw back. It just makes it quicker, Steve, I think, is one of the things it's really helpful with at the minute. And we do that in content. We do it, if I'm doing presentations, if I want to do some research on what's happening in the industry, it's just making that really fast. Like we said earlier, I think we're just scratching the surface. There's lots more application for it. It'll get smarter. Will it get as passionate? I hope not.
Hey, two more questions, Colin. One is how, as Bede supporting operators, how does that work in terms of player protection?
Oh, good. Well, all of the data about the player is sort of in our gift, Steve. So, we have everything about them from their sort of registration profile and their verification profile, and then we have everything about them in terms of their behaviours whilst they're interacting with our services. So there's obviously a world outside of that for players as well, but we deal with what we know on the platform. Bede has tools in terms of the limits that you can set and the exclusions that you can set. Those two areas are probably the key ones. We also are able to work with our partners on the use of their data in terms of the predictions and the modelling, so that when players are deemed to be at risk, those flags and those interactions can be set off. But I think I should also say, we do work with some third parties who are good in this space as well. I'm not sure if you have had Leon from Future Anthem, for example, but they are consuming data for operators and creating recommendations. Now, Future Anthem probably well known for sort of personalisation, but I know they're moving into the area of safer gambling as well. So there's a lot of operators are doing this differently. I've been having some interesting conversations with one party recently who are looking at sort of marrying data that sits externally to a customer's behaviour in gambling to what they're doing in gambling. Now, I'm not sure about the sort of data protection angle to that yet, Steve, but I think it's interesting because there's so much more going on in someone's life than just their gambling transactional activity. And I think if you could enrich both, you could probably have a better, safer gambling model in play for your customers. And then, with OLG in mind, we're continually support their Play Safe program. I think that's a really standout program, probably in global gambling. Actually, I've been to the casinos in Niagara and elsewhere in Ontario, and they always have a strong presence in the land base, and you can go in there and talk to real people again about how you're gambling, how you're finding the games, how to play the games. You can also talk to them about what's happening if you're playing digitally as well. That is somebody who's been in lots of casinos in the UK, for example. There isn't really a parallel there. In the UK, that's those responsibilities are dealt with differently. So our data is sort of feeding that activity as well. So I think there's a lot more we do in this space, but AI modeling, prediction, and maybe enriching data from other sources is going to help operators make it, or continue to make it, even safer for players.
Yes, I mean OLG has received a lot of praise for their smart sense centers at casinos across the province, and then BCLC I think has also been recognized globally for its GameSense RG product as well. Last question, Colin. You mentioned slots earlier, and this is such a diverse industry right now, and I'm sure you're following what's going on in the US with prediction markets and sweepstakes and button fights over daily fantasy sports, and you mentioned slots early. I mean, is there a product out there that surprised you? And again, full disclosure, I'm not an online casino player, but is there a product out there that you thought, you've been quite surprised that it's resonated so strongly with gaming customers? Or is there something you see where, again, you see more exciting products? And I think, again, of, just simple things like a lot of casino products, rebranding themselves after American TV shows, like let's make a deal, and some of those shows that have become extremely popular, or reusing movie or television show, Wheel of Fortune's another one. Is there something that gets you excited, or you think what's the next great game?
I must just say, Steve, this is really difficult because if you talk to the game providers, they'll talk to you about how great the games are. But there's so many games out there, and there's still only it's a relative fraction of those games that actually go on to be successful. So it's really difficult. So there's lots of games you play that you might enjoy that don't actually resonate with the wider customer base. I think the one that I saw that surprised me most recently, was probably the Crash games, because when I was at Entain, they were only really popular in South Africa, and Entain obviously was active in lots of markets. Those games they've grown exponentially in South Africa, and they're now in lots of other markets. And I think it's a good category when you see the big operators building their own version of the same game. That's always a telltale sign, and you can see that happening. So that's probably the most recent one that surprised me. But there's a lot of innovation to go at across the board. Slots has never stopped innovating. And I mentioned the German market earlier, but there'll be other nuances in other markets that will drive that innovation. But sitting things like tournaments on top is gonna help. If you're gamifying outside the game and you've got the game providers doing it in the game, you're gonna have a product that's going to appeal to customers for a long time to come, I'm sure.
Hey, Colin, sorry, I lied. One more question. Just when you wake up, when you wake up in the morning right now, like what's kind of your primary focus as CEO with Bede? What's the one thing that you're kind of consumed with these days?
I mean, obviously, my role here is to sort of lead and make sure we're following our plan and our strategy. So I'm always looking at those things. But I try and keep in touch with the team as well, Steve. We're not a huge team. I've got a team of 7 or 8, and then through those people I can keep in touch with most of the company. But I do try and meet regularly with everyone at Bede to understand what's going on and what's important to individuals, and that sort of everyone understands what our mission is. So it's those things, and then I'm looking at the metrics, Steve. I said at the start, I'm quite metrics orientated. And we have, I think, as CEO of a technology company in gambling at the minute, I thought you were going to say to me, what's the thing that keeps you up at night. It is for sure. Yeah, and I'm not a deep techie, but I've got a great team of people who understand the world of technology really well. But I'd be surprised if you didn't meet someone in my sort of role who wasn't talking to you about stability and security. They're huge for us, and we take that. That's got to be looked after really well. And then everything else can come after that. So that's a bit of a rambling answer, Steve, but multiple areas, I think, is probably the answer.
Yeah, that's. I think that's the answer you'd hear from most leaders. That is Colin Cole-Johnson, the Chief Executive Officer of Bede Gaming. Hey, Colin, this was a great conversation, and just makes me reinforces that we should have done this sooner. Thanks so much for joining me on the podcast. And listen, we'll get you back on sometime in the new year.
Thank you for having me, Steve. Been a pleasure. Lovely to meet you. Thanks very much.
Thanks. That's it for this episode of the Gaming News Canada show presented by Bede Gaming. You can listen to this interview on all the podcast apps, and you can also watch Colin and I on the Gaming News Canada YouTube channel. Thanks again to Colin Cole-Johnson for joining us on the show today, and we will see everybody again very, very soon.